Hello, my name is Dano, and welcome to Rule Your Sound, the place for songwriters, producers, and music lovers to learn tips and tricks from today's top artists so we can build out our library of ideas and take our own sound and our own songwriting to the next level. This is part 2 of a 2-part series on theory that songwriters must know, so if you didn't see part 1, definitely check it out so that you can follow along with today's video. Now, if you remember from the last video, we talked about a tool called Solfege, which can help translate what you're hearing in your head or what you're hearing on the radio into something that you can actually play. Now, I hope that you've practiced it and you're more familiar with Solfege. So as we get to the application part, in today's video, we're gonna first go over some basic chord theory so that you know what to play, and then we're gonna go over how you can use Solfege to know what you have to play on the piano or the guitar. All right, so let's nerd out over some theory together. First, let's review chord qualities in a major key. We're gonna use C major because there's no sharps and flats, and that makes it a little easier to see what's going on. In the last video, we applied Solfege to the major scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. We also learned that that major scale each has a scale degree. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now in the key of C, with C as the starting note, that translates into C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. I am not gonna go over how to transpose things to other keys or key signatures and sharps and flats and other keys. So if you are not familiar with that, I've linked some resources below with some more information so that you can get more familiar with how to transpose and play things in other keys besides the key of C. Now we get into the fun part, the chords. Chords consist of 2 triads stacked on top of each other, and triad is just a fancy way to say it's 3 notes above the starting note. So if you start on C, a triad above that would be E, and a triad above that would be G. Play them all together, and voila, we have a C chord. Because this chord starts on the first scale degree, we call this the 1 chord. These Roman numerals are really important because the 1 chord is the 1 chord whether you're in the key of C, whether you're in the key of G, whether you're in the key of B flat. It doesn't matter, the 1 is the 1, and knowing that is going to allow you to be able to transpose to other keys. That's why it's really important to learn these as Roman numerals instead of learning them just as a C chord, if that makes sense. So with that logic, a C chord is a 1 chord, the D chord is a 2 chord, the E chord is a 3 chord, the F chord is a 4 chord, the G chord is a 5 chord, the A chord is a 6 chord, and the B chord is a 7 chord. Now, something else that's going to be really important for you to understand, especially when you're transposing, but also when you're listening to music, is that if you heard when we just went up that scale, not all of those chords sounded the same. They had different sound qualities to them. Now, most of you are able to hear if a chord is major or minor. A major chord sounds happy and a minor chord sounds sad. Let's listen to the 1 chord and see if you can figure out if it's a major or minor chord. And you guessed it, it's a major chord. That means that no matter what key you play in, if you play in the key of D, that 1 chord is a D, and it's gonna be a major chord. Now let's move on to the 2nd chord. Does this sound happy or sad to you? That's right, you guessed it, this is a minor chord. So again, when we translate to other keys, we know that the 2 chord is always going to be a minor chord. Now let's do that all the way up the scale. What about the 3 chord? Yep, you guessed it, it's a minor chord. And now the 4 chord is a major chord. The 5th chord, another major chord. The 6th chord, a minor chord. And the 7th chord. Now this is a special one, this is unique. This chord is actually called a diminished chord. The reason it's diminished is because the 5th scale degree is actually a half step lower than it is in the minor chord. Here's what a B minor chord sounds like. And this is a B diminished chord. Don't worry about this too much, just know that the 7th chord in every key is going to be a diminished chord. Now I highly recommend memorizing these chord qualities because they are the same no matter what key you're in, and most pop and contemporary music generally follows these chords and these guidelines, so it's a great place to start. So far up to this point, we learned what solfege is, and we learned what chords are in a major key and what the quality is of those chords. Is it major, minor, or diminished? And so now we can finally get to the fun part where you can apply all of this so that you can hear a sound either on the radio or a song that's in your head and be able to play it on your instrument. The best way to start doing this is to really get familiar with the bass lines of a song, which are really going to indicate what the chord progressions are. All right, so there are 5 steps on how to do this. I'm going to start by just telling you what the steps are, and then we're going to apply them to a song and do it together. Step 1 is to sing the bass line. This is pretty self-explanatory. You just sing along to the bass to the best of your ability. Step 2 is to find do. Do, if you remember, is the one, the home, the tonic note. If you struggle with finding do, just practice. I promise this isn't too difficult, but if you're like me, sometimes I struggle with finding a do, especially when songs don't start on do, and a lot of pop songs don't these days. A lot of pop songs are starting on la or other chords. So what you just want to listen to it for a little bit and see if you can find that note. Just sing it in your head that sounds like home. We'll practice, but of course, just like anything else, the only way you're going to get better at this is by practicing, and practicing. Step 3 is to apply solfege syllables to that bass line. This is why it's important to know where do is, because using that logic, you can figure out where all of the other notes that you're singing fall on the scale degree so that you can sing it in solfege. Step 4 is to play that bass line on your instrument, and it does not matter what key you play it in for this to work. Step 5 is to add in the chord qualities that we went over at the beginning of this video. So for example, if we're in the key of C and your bass line is do, fa, sol, do, you know that it's going to be C major, F major, G major, C major. And that's it. So I know that that was a lot and it seems more complicated than it is, I promise, but let's put this to practice and do a song together. All right, so we are going to practice using Dynamite by BTS. So let's just dive right in. Step 1 is to sing the bass line. I'm going to play it for you a few times and see if you can get familiar with what that bass line is.
'Cause I'm in the stars tonight, so watch me bring the fire, set the night light.
All right, so you should have gotten do, 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 do. If you didn't get that, try listening again and see if you can hear how that is the bass line in the song. Step 2 is to find do. For me personally, this is a feel thing. It's that note that is home. So what I usually do is I find do and then I check it along with the next steps. And if something seems a little funky, then I'll go back and see if I got my do right. But let's listen to it again and see if you can find the note that sounds the most homey, the note where you feel like the song is really centered around. Let's take another listen.
'Cause I'm in the stars tonight, so watch me bring the fire, set the night light.
Did you get do? That's the do note that we know is going to be the one chord in this song. Okay, so step 3 is to sing the bass line in solfege syllables. We established that this is do. Do. And we know that the bass line is this. Do, 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 do. So starting there, we know that the last note is do. Do. So if you practice your solfege syllables from the last video, you can use that as a starting point to figure out what the solfege syllables are. So now when you apply the solfege syllables, it's la, re, sol, do, la, re, sol, do. All right, so step 4 is to translate that bass line onto your instrument. So what I usually do is I just sing do in my head and find it on the keyboard. Do. We know that do is F, so using our intervals, we now know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which scale degree corresponds with each note, and we know that it's la, re, sol, do, which is 6, 2, 5, 1. So go ahead and play it on your instrument. Great, so we know that the chords are 6, 2, 5, 1. The last thing you need to know is what we went over in the beginning of this video is you have to know whether those chords are major or minor. Now you can listen to the song to figure this out, but for me what's easiest, especially as a starting point, is doing what would be the right chord in that key. So we know that 6 is a minor chord, so we're going to play D minor. We know that 2 is a minor chord, so we're going to play G minor. We know that 5 is a major chord, so we are going to play C major. And we know that 1 is a major chord, so we are going to play F major. Put it all together. And now you can play Dynamite by BTS. The more you do this and the more you get familiar and practice this, your ear is going to develop so strong that you can hear anything and play it right away on your instrument. I can't reiterate enough how important this is as a songwriter because I can hear a bass line in my head, I hear a song in my head that I want to play or that I want to write, and I can just sit down and do it. I don't have to guess and check, which is so painful because before I knew how to do this, I would spend so much time guessing and checking. By the time I figured out what chords I wanted to play, I was overwriting and I did not feel like writing anymore, and all my creative energy was wasted on guessing and checking on trying to figure out these chords. So of course this is something that can be practiced, and a free resource that I have used to practice all the time is on tonedear.com. We went to that site in video number 1, so we're going to go back to it for video number 2. So if you head over to tonedear.com, you're going to want to click on the ear training practice that is chord progressions. So in this exercise, they are going to play different chord progressions, and you're going to use the techniques that we learned to listen to the bass line and see if you can figure out what chords they are. I love this site because again, it's going to start with some simple triads, the 1, the 4, and the 5. And then as you get it right, it's going to keep on adding more triads. If you're a beginner and have never done this before, I highly recommend going to Show Advanced Options and selecting Fixed Key so that you can get really familiar with hearing these different chords. And then as it becomes a little easier, I would remove that because it's going to change the key up so you can get familiar with hearing this in literally every key. Another thing that I love to do and is such a fun way to practice is I'll actually play an album from start to finish, and I will just do my absolute best to play along to it on the piano. Now, what's really important is do not guess and check. Don't just press buttons and wait until you hear something that lines up. Before you even play anything, listen to it, sing the bass line. In a lot of pop music, especially, the chord progressions are repeated and repeated over and over again. So listen to it, sing the bass line, translate it into solfege, play the bass line on your instrument, and then add in the chords, and you will be able to play basically any song. So I hope that this was so helpful to you. If you have any questions at all, please let me know in the comment box. I will do my absolute best to respond to every single one. And I'm so excited to hear how this has helped you in your songwriting and musical journey. For more videos on songwriting tips, please make sure that you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss anything. Thank you so much for tuning in today and subscribing and liking, and I cannot wait to see how you can apply this solfege to take your songwriting and your musicianship to the next level. See you next time.